Hi, this is Kevin Sousa. In this short audio, I will answer the question, how do mistakes give you positive feedback in life? They provide opportunities for growth and learning. Mistakes can motivate you to be more creative and resourceful in finding solutions. I want to talk about a few failures that I've experienced and what I did not do about them and what I did do about them. So I'm going to start way back when I was 3 years old, my first real memory that I can actually consciously remember. I'm sure there are other memories before that we probably could access. But anyway, that first memory was Daddy's coffee. I was 3 years old. Wow. I can remember back then. Amazing. Well, what happened is what caused me to remember it for the rest of my life. And I went to the kitchen table as a 3-year-old, and I saw at the, kind of not the edge of the table, but a little bit in, was a cup, and I wanted to know what was in it. So my curiosity went to the cup, and I looked. There was this brown liquid in there, right? And I didn't know what it was, so I thought, I'm going to take a sip, because that's what we do with cups, right? So I took a sip, and I put the cup down, and immediately I heard, "Hey, what are you doing?" I was scared at that voice. It was my stepfather. I didn't know he was my stepfather back then at age 3 because I wasn't intelligent enough yet to know. And, "Did you drink my coffee?" No, Daddy, I said out of fear. And I didn't know that there were dribbles of coffee on my shirt. Now, he did not see me drink the coffee, but he did see the dribbles on my shirt. "So, come here." He took his belt off and he whipped me with his belt, and it hurt. And I screamed in pain and fear and cried, etc. And I was very, very scared of him and intimidated of him. But I did learn my very first lesson from that failure. The failure was I lied. And related to that failure was I did something without permission. So, the lesson learned, tell the truth. So I learned that at age 3. And then at age 5, when I was in kindergarten, we were living at that time in a tenement on a second floor. And my mother did not get along with the third floor lady. And she had a son named Ralph, who was about a year older than me. And one day in the backyard, she enticed her son to jump on me and start punching me in the face while I was on the ground. And sure enough, he did. And so I got my first whipping as a kid in a fight with the next door neighbor's, the upstairs neighbor's son. And so the lesson I learned from that was to lay low, don't rock the boat, don't get people angry, right? And then fast forward to my first year as a sophomore in the high school. And they didn't have freshmen in our high school. Freshman was the last grade in junior high. That was grade 9. And then grade 10, I auditioned for my first show. It was Fiddler on the Roof. And I auditioned for a role called Perchik, who is one of the characters that falls in love with one of the leading role's daughters. And I went to the resource center in the high school and played that song over and over and over and over again until I had it down pat. So I auditioned for that role, and I didn't get it. I got the rabbi's son, a bit part, right? So I was despondent, sad. I felt like I failed, but I realized that I needed to learn more about acting. And so that was the lesson I learned. How do mistakes give you positive feedback in life? They give you a better understanding of yourself and your capabilities. Mistakes teach you valuable lessons about dealing with adversity and failure. Now, fast forward a little bit more. I went to the New England Conservatory of Music in Boston to major in voice, where I met my first wife. And within a couple of years, what I had done was I had left college. I had quit college, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But I had 2 sons on my first marriage. But I was a very immature adult, wet behind the ears, and that marriage just didn't work out. So that was a failure. And what did I learn from that failure? Well, I learned that I was an immature young adult and that maturity is an important aspect of an adult's life. And little lessons like that were big lessons, huge lessons to me. Then I had my first home-based business while I was in college. I joined my first home-based business, and my first 2 home meetings, 80 people total that week said no. And so talk about 80 failures in a row, right? I considered them failures. And I didn't realize that time, because I was still wet behind the ears, that they weren't rejecting me, they were rejecting the opportunity. However, people take it personally. And so many people even today do. I can never make success. I can never get sales. I have problems. They reinforce what they don't want just by virtue of repeating what happened. And that is dangerous because you can sabotage your success. So when I got divorced from my first marriage and eventually moved to New Hampshire, I obviously had to have a job. So I tried several restaurants and didn't like them. And the restaurant business was the only thing I was exposed to. When I was 16, I had my first job in a restaurant. And eventually, I became an assistant manager and then eventually a store manager of a Pizza Hut in my 20s. And that's where I met my second wife. 10 years later, I caught her cheating on me in a nightclub. And so we got divorced. And again, lesson learned. I thought maybe, I wasn't being the loving husband that you need to be. And so she was searching elsewhere. I didn't know that it was not me at the time. We discovered it was her. So I got into telemarketing out of the restaurant business in New Hampshire, and eventually I moved back to Massachusetts, and I got into car sales, and that's where I met my next wife. And I performed in shows after having not performed in shows for years. And I loved selling cars because I was able to do things that Mr. Joe Girard did, the one who wrote the book, How to Sell Anything to Anybody. He was one of the greatest car salespeople in the world. He worked at Morales Chevrolet. Anyway, I got into, after car sales, inside sales with Aramark Corporation. And that was my last job. And after 6 years, I was able to retire from that job at age 49 for the rest of my life, way back in 2008, which was now 15 years ago. And the mistakes that I made in life, I still make mistakes in life. Guess what? We all will. We will all continue to experience temporary failure. By the way, I labeled it as that after I read that you can label failure as temporary. And I've gone through some pretty tough experiences like everybody else has in life. But one thing that I'm really grateful for is because I plugged in way back then, for almost 46 years ago, to a personal development regimen of continually attending functions, listening to audios, reading books, and counseling with successful people. I became a little wiser, more happier, and better prepared to be able to build my home-based business. And defeat and failure is so destructive, especially when you accept it as failure. But when you accept it as teaching a lesson, it's always a blessing. And somebody who just continues to fight on and press on can't fail. A person has really never failed until they accept temporary defeat as failure. There's a wide difference between temporary defeat and failure.
How do mistakes give you positive feedback in life? They help you to develop problem-solving skills by considering different approaches and options. As you reflect on what went wrong, you might approach the situation differently in the future.
And I want you to go out today and make today the best day of your life. Go and grow. Don't let anybody steal your dreams. And bye for now.